like to bring up Dr. Paul Cole of Tendril. He's the VP of Consumer Products there. He's a psychologist. He's been a software developer, an entrepreneur, and he's the person who leads Tendril's efforts to engage consumers and develops the tools for utilities to use. He's got a doctorate in psychology. Paul, thanks for taking time today.
Thank you, Jesse. Today I really want to talk about what I see as the future of smart grid consumer engagement. I'll start by talking a little bit about Tendril, about what we're doing, but I want to focus on some very specific pieces that I see emerging that I think are important for the industry to understand. Tendril is a platform provider for the energy internet. We provide a series of solutions. Those solutions range from energy efficiency to load control. Some of those solutions are tightly integrated with smart meters, and some of those solutions leverage billing data from standard meters. So we do a range of solutions. And what's different about Tendril is the platform approach, the range of solutions, and the kind of unique behavioral model that informs our solutions. And I'm going to talk about that. So before we talk about the future, let's talk about where we are, where we've been with engagement in the smart grid. Initially, meters were the first thing to be deployed, and those meters were deployed without any real interface to consumers. Over time, we started deploying in-home displays and simple web data feedback. So there were data graphs, data visualizations, and those were typically on the web. Over time, engagement broadened to include additional information. So that information were tips, actions, additional resources, and social comparison. So the trend from an engagement point of view is delivering additional information to consumers related to their energy use. And the question is, what's next? I think we're at a point where there's a fairly significant shift emerging. What we know in terms of how people behave and how people change is that information is not enough, and that providing more and more information is not enough. What we're seeing is a different quality of information and a focus not on one-way communication, but on two-way communication and on interaction. And so the next set of applications that are emerging both at Tendril and I think in the rest of the industry are characterized by what I call participation and personalization. Information is increasingly targeted specifically to an individual, and there are opportunities that these applications provide for increasing levels of interaction. The way that information is going to be deployed is going to be much broader. So we're not looking at just IHD and web apps or some information on a thermostat when those are available, but we're looking at multiple channels, and we're looking at consumers having much more choice about how they get their information. And lastly, we're looking at the kind of evolution of behavioral sciences, an important way to understand customers and understand how to target and how to engage them. What we're seeing, and I think what we're going to be seeing much more, is a much higher level of engagement, satisfaction, and savings. And I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the web trends that I think are influencing smart grid applications, and I'm going to talk about what Tendril has seen in some of their longer-term studies. So let me back up for a minute and talk a little bit about the web. The web today is social. In the mid-90s, the web was a one-way publishing model. By the mid-2000s, we see the web becoming interactive environment. Typically, when you think social, you think Facebook. But in reality, the interactive capabilities are much broader than Facebook. You can think about Wikipedia, you can think about blogs, you can think about the multitude of shared interests and hobby forums that exist. For example, if I have a technical problem, and particularly if I'm not in the office, I get on the net and Google a problem, and I typically find an answer. And where I find that answer is not necessarily with a company spokesman. It's with a forum where someone's discussing this and somebody has posted a solution to a specific problem. So you find these information typically through interactions with others. So the second thing that's interesting about the web is that even applications that you don't think of as social, right, they're not Facebook, have social components. So let's talk about Amazon, for example. Amazon has a number of features, typically what's popular, what others have read, and reviews that are all social. And they're social in two ways, or they're typically kind of labeled social. One is that end user content, somebody has posted it, but it's what we call either passive or active. So passive end user content comes from an activity that I do on the site. For example, I buy a book. When somebody else buys that book, they can look at how many people have bought that book, how popular it is today, and typically one of the features that I like best are what are the other books somebody's read. So I, as a user, haven't done anything, but the data from my interaction is useful to other people. That's one component of social. The other component is an active piece of content I put in, like a review. I may review a book. When I talk about how people interact, what are the patterns of use they see, the rule of thumb is called 1-9-90. And they see this across popular applications on the web. And that rule indicates that typically your heavy contributors are only 1% of the population. Another 9% may participate or contribute periodically, but the vast majority of users are readers. So if you think about YouTube, for example, most people view videos. They don't post them. Some people comment, very few percentage-wise. So that's an indication of the kinds of goals we should look for, because that's what exists in the web today. So with that as context, let me talk a little bit about Tendril and the behavioral approach that Tendril takes. So we created a behavior change model that comes from years of behavior science and applied it to energy. And what we know, particularly if we want persistent change, change that lasts over time, we know that people change when they have a meaningful goal, then they have information or steps or actions to get to that goal. They have feedback on their progress, and that occurs in a social environment. So let me talk about how we've implemented that. If you're interested in behavior change, you may look at this month's Atlantic Monthly. It's the cover article is about behavioral science as influencing health applications. And we're basically doing the same thing but applying to energy. So the top two components, providing feedback and providing actions and or information, is what we've seen over time in the kind of suite of applications that exist for smart grid today. What is evolving and what we deliver now are additional components, both what we call goal setting or ability to set a goal, and social components, social environment. And that's really what I want to focus on for the 5 or 10 minutes I have, because I think it's an area that is typically misunderstood, and it's an area that I think we're going to see a big increase in importance. So social comparison, it becomes the base. So we're trying to provide additional information to people, but we also know that comparison is not enough. And so we provide ability to comment or interact on actions, which are the information, the savings actions or tips we make available, and what we call snapshots. And we provide those in a peer forum, the ability to post information in a thread. The next set of things, community leaderboard and point systems, are both social and gamification concepts. The leaderboards enable people to see, it ranks people, it shows the top savers, and it enables people to see how they stand compared to others in their community. The point system is ability to allocate points based on either savings or participation that allows reward systems to be implemented. The last social component is both a home profile and a user profile, and that allows people to share additional information. So how do we think about this, and what are the learnings, or what are the things to consider? First, we know that as we move from a one-way communication and a comparison model to a more interactive model, we need to consider a number of things, and we need to understand that the users have a wide range of both motivation and interests, from collaboration, comparison, to competition and communication. As we deploy these for utilities, it's important for these particularly social capabilities to be optional, so that utility customers can turn them on as they're ready, can modify them as they're ready, because one size doesn't fit all, and it's important to have an opportunity to test these kind of things. The same is true for individual users. So when we provide a profile, for example, it's very important to provide a lot of choice to a user about how much they share. Some people are interested in having a lot of their information on the applications. Others don't want to be sharing information, don't want their names posted on a leaderboard, for example. So that flexibility is pretty key when you're thinking about social components. The next thing is the balance between both peer and expert. So we provide an expert forum, the ability to ask our experts or the utilities experts questions, but as well as peers. And the last is, in order for these to be successful, our experts need to manage the community.